What's up, guys? Here's another step by step. We're going to be drawing a realistic eye. We're going to start first off with drawing the inside of the eye, the pupil and the iris, two circles, and we're going to divide that in half horizontal. We're going to draw the outside of the eye with the eyelid, and the inside of the eye is going to dip down a little bit further than the outside, kind of a lemon shape. I'm defining the outside of that iris there, and I'm going to add the top eyelid, the fold over the top. There's going to be a little bit of space in between. After you got that, go in and clean up any lines, any of those guidelines that you don't need anymore. Then we're going to go in and start adding more detail. So I'm erasing those few lines I started with. All right, so I'm going in there. I'm going to add the tear duct now, rounding off the edges of that, and then I'm going to go in and add a highlight in the iris. Now anytime you're looking at a light, that light will reflect back on the eye, and that's what I'm adding there. Cleaning things up a bit, I'm going in and I'm darkening the top of the eyelid some, because that area will be really dark. It will set the eyeball back into the eyelid a little bit more. Cleaning up some things, I'm shading in the middle, the pupil of the eye. That's one of the darkest parts when you're shading. And now I'm adding details inside of the iris. This is where the color is in your eye. If you are doing color drawing, this is where you add it. I'm doing squiggly lines, going from the outside in, changing directions as I'm going around the eye. I'm gonna add a few little squiggly lines coming out of the pupil too. And as I said, I'm using charcoal, so I'm gonna go in and you get my darker charcoal here, add a few more little details, and start shading with my finger as I'm doing that, just to smooth out some of those details that we added to make it a little bit more realistic, to soften some edges. And because the eye is round, an eyeball, and it's set within that eye socket there around the eyelid, you have to add shading to make it realistic. Anything round, any change of direction will have shading. So the white part of the eye, that's where I'm adding some shading. I'm adding some shading from the eyelid down, from that fold, to soften that edge some. So I put a dark line and I'm blending it down. Anytime there's a change of direction, there has to be a change of value. I'm adding the bottom eyelid here. It's a little bit softer, not as defined as that top fold. And I'm going around and I'm adding any little details, any other little shadows. This is my darker compressed charcoal stick, darkening that edge. You'll see as you darken other things, you'll see that what you started off with and thought was dark will probably need to darken up. The outside of the iris, the outer edge, that is extremely dark, sometimes darker than the pupil. So here I'm going back in, darkening, softening edges, adding little details to make it even more realistic. All right, now that you basically have your realistic eye done, we need to add the eyelashes. So I'm adding the eyelashes on the top now. I'm starting underneath the eyelid, really dark and heavy, curving it up and out and lifting up as I do so. So it'll start heavy at the base of the eyelash and then lighten up as you curve up and around. So start heavy at the bottom and then lift up and out with your pencil or your charcoal stick. You want it to start underneath the eyelid, dip down and come up. Start here, go up and around. Now we're gonna add the eyelashes on the bottom. There's a lot less at the bottom. They're shorter, fewer of them, not as heavy, but you still wanna have a few down there at the bottom to give that realistic look. Now I'm gonna go in and add an eyebrow. I'm gonna scratch in a few lines up here with my charcoal stick. I'm gonna do a thicker, kind of bushier eyebrow up here so it's easier to see. This is where you can get a little bit creative with yours. You can change the shape, the definition, add a little bit more detail to it, make it a little bit more defined. I'm just using a big piece of charcoal here to throw a big old bushy eyebrow on here, kind of blend that out a little bit. Now that you have your eyebrow on there, now it's time to add some values and shading around the whole eyeball, eyebrow, the whole area. Think about anytime there's a change of direction, there has to be a change of value. Where would it get darker in shadows around the face, around the whole eye? This is just gonna help it look a little bit more three-dimensional, a little more realistic, adding all these shadings and highlights. Look at a mirror to help you with all this if you're drawing your own eye as well. I've listed the materials I use. Fine charcoal is a lighter one, compressed charcoal is a darker one, and a kneaded eraser to clean things up. Use what material you have and submit me your best realistic eye drawing.